David, what are your thoughts?
I agreed with Robin before and thought the same thing, but I think the president has a good point. What's happened here is that Bernie Sanders has dropped significantly, and the others haven't caught on yet. And that's given Vice President Biden a shot in the arm and a boost in the polls. But, I think the real analogy for his campaign is not President Trump's campaign. I think the real analogy is actually Hillary's 2016 campaign, where she came on at the beginning as the establishment pick. Joe Biden's got that. He's the guy from Washington for decades. The party wants to see him because the polls show he does well against President Trump. But will the progressives sit back and let the party establishment dictate their nominee again? That still remains to be seen. If one of these young new people can consolidate that momentum the way Biden did in '08, you could see a real contest still, I think.
Robin, I want to go back to this because it seems like on the minds of voters, at least the ones who are being polled right now, they're thinking about Biden, they're thinking about Sanders, but we're seeing in some of these pollings, when you go into the demographics of this, Biden is actually pulling from some of the Sanders base, that Sanders less to the left side of politics. Is that a concern for anyone who's not Biden?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That should be a concern for anyone not Biden, because it shows that the majority of the country really is sort of on this somewhere in the middle. They're not so far to the left. They're not so far to the right. It's right there in that sweet spot in the middle. So some of these other candidates are going to have to craft a message sort of like Amy Klobuchar is that really resonates with more of the Rust Belt and Midwest.
And we saw the RCP average of polls at the beginning of the segment. Now, I want to point you out to one out of New Hampshire, the first in the nation primary state. Look at the lead Biden has over Bernie Sanders. He's 2-1. Is this an early sign of the president's point that the former vice president will, quote, steamroll the competition? And David, you start with this one.
Yeah, it's a big lead for Biden. Again, I think it's a drop by Sanders that explains most of that. Interestingly, you see Mayor Pete there in third place, coming from nowhere. So I think it's going to evolve over time. The activists will be very energized, and they tend to be less enthusiastic. You look at that poll, and anybody under 50, Bernie is still beating Biden. So there's a lot of in the weeds that will go on as these develop. But Biden has to be happy with that result, starting out at the gates in New Hampshire that way.
And Robin, is this the competition that the president and Republicans want out of the gate? He is doing well in the polls, and he's running on an Obama policy platform. And Robin, I would like you to go to first on this because you recently wrote about this in a Fox News op-ed.
I did. Thank you so much. I do honestly think that Biden is probably President Trump's preferred candidate to go up against because, yes, Biden is the ultimate centrist, but that kind of works against him also. I'm from the Obama era. I myself have been called part of the old school. So, in the end, kind of like David said, this may speak to voters because it's just not bringing anything that fresh or new like some of the younger candidates are. David mentioned Pete Buttigieg. He's really captivating so many hearts of people in my party. So it's interesting to see him rocketing right ahead with this, Alicia.
And David, what do you think? Does the president want a battle with Biden?
I think his recent interview indicates he probably does. I imagine he sees the lineup in that case becoming outside of Washington versus longtime Washington insider. And he feels he has an advantage in the blue wall states and the southern states that'll all be the battleground in the next election in the fall.
Well, okay, we have a long way to go, especially in politics.
Oh, yes.
David McIntosh and Robin Byro, thank you.
Great to be with you.
Thank you.
Well, Alicia, Kim Jong-un is a, quote,